go ahead and get started. Jess, you ready? I should ask that first.
I think I'm ready.
I just like to throw Jess under the bus. It's one of my hobbies. Well, hi everybody. I'm Joy Hatcher. I'm the Social Studies Program Manager, and welcome to Let's Get Visual, Instructional Strategy, Instructional Activities at SWIRL. I think it's hilarious that you can still tell that they're wearing masks while doing the announcements.
I know. It's all muffled, unless it's just a really old sound system. You never know.
Right, that's true.
I'm going to mute everyone. So.
Well, hopefully not us. Jess, you want to introduce yourself?
I will. I'm Jessica Booth. I'm the Fine Arts Program Manager at the Department of Education, and work pretty closely with our fabulous ladies of Social Studies.
So during the session today, there'll be several opportunities to participate. So feel free to unmute yourself to talk and remute yourself after you're done, or you can type in the chat, and Jennifer and Joanne, our secret friends, will keep us informed. Just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. This is a part 2. You don't have to have had the part 1, but today's session will focus on arts integration and what that looks like, and some practical activities you could take back and use in the classroom, some formative and summative assessments. Just a reminder.
Fade out on us.
Did I freeze?
You did.
Oh, well, it was just the agenda. It's okay. You'll get a copy of this. After we're done today, we will send you a link to all the materials for today's session. And you know, you can go back and look at that. Just a quick reminder about SWIRL. Jess, you have to keep moving, or I think I'm frozen. This session relies heavily on what students do in inquiry in a social studies classroom, and how they express their thinking through speaking, writing, illustrating, reading, and listening. And Jess, I know you like to talk about that one in particular.
Illustrating?
Yeah.
Yeah. For illustration, basically is a nice fancy word for you are the person who draws the pictures or paints them that goes with text. And that was my former career. I was an illustrator and did a bunch of magazine and articles, illustration, and then I was an architectural illustrator. So I always like that illustration is part of SWIRL for ESOL and for social studies.
And not just creating, but also analyzing visuals in a historical or really modern context. So this session will rely heavily on all of the letters of SWIRL. Just as a reminder, in case you didn't visit us for part 1, we hope that you are doing some visual note taking today and practicing that, which doesn't mean to draw your notes. What it means is think about how you use color and size and imagery in order to organize and make meaning of your thoughts. Anything else to add on that one, Jess?
No, I think that the easiest way to ease yourself into visual note taking is think about all the times that you're trying to study something for school and you changed the colors of the pens so that you would remember, or you used a highlighter to remember passages in a book.
Yep. Also, bulleting is a way of organizing in a visual way. Thinking maps, all those good things. I want to start off very quickly by asking the group to take 30 seconds, type in the chat or unmute your mic, and answer the question, where does visual literacy fit in inquiry? And if you're not familiar, on the right, that's the Look For's document, which is, you know, a quick summary of what you want to see in a good social studies inquiry lesson. So where does visual literacy fit? And again, Joanne and Jennifer will let us know if you type anything in the chat.
Lamisha said, Jessica says engagement. And Lamisha says could prompt creative thinking.
Mm-hmm. And the real answer is anywhere. Visual literacy can fit anywhere in any of these categories of good social studies instruction. You're asking good questions about, see, Krista, you're a cheater, or well-informed. You're the gifted kid, right?
She is ESP. In.
She has ESPN, right? Okay, so you could be speaking, writing, or listening to someone's analysis of a visual. You could be creating one. A visual could be a source that you are using to analyze a time period. It could be a piece of work, could be debated or discussed. And you could ask questions and think about a piece of artwork um, in a multitude of ways as a geographer, as a historian. So everything we're doing today is related to every part of inquiry. And since this is about arts integration, we wanted to start off asking you how you define arts integration. So if you'll take a second, and that means 30, type in the chat, how would you define arts integration right now? And you can unmute yourself as well. And Jennifer and Joanne will share that with us. I hear someone feverishly typing away. Jennifer and Joanne, share with us, if we don't have any in the chat, share us your definition. How would you define it?
Well, Jessica says incorporating arts into inquiry or project-based learning.
Nice, nice.
And Krista said can be used to illustrate difficult vocabulary, what students think something is going to be about at the beginning of a lesson.
Okay. So I want you to, is that Parker?
No, Parker's snoring.
Everyone, we're all dog people, so it could be a variety of our fur babies saying hello throughout the session. So I want you to kind of pin your definition in your mind as we go through today's session, because we're going to just jump right on into Jess talking about what it means.
Okay, and Joy, you're going to need to forward this since you have the PowerPoint. Thanks. It's interesting to always hear what people think arts integration is. And I always try to think of arts education as being 3 really different avenues. So you have like just a real arts education. This is going to be learning for its own sake. It's the art's own intrinsic value. This is usually done by a certified arts teacher, whether it's visual art or music teacher, and someone that's studied this as their craft. So that's what I think of as like an art education. And then the other avenue of arts education is arts enhancement. And that's typically what I see when we go out and do certification visits for STEAM, or we just have started awarding an Arts Integration School of Excellence Award at the DOE for schools. And when we're reviewing those applications, a lot of what I see is arts enhancement, which is just using the arts as a vehicle to move a different subject along. So we all learned the ABC song by singing it, but it didn't necessarily teach us anything about music. So that would be what I consider arts enhancement. And then Joy, you need to push it one more time. There we go. And then I always think of arts integration as the sides of a scale, so that the art standards, whether that's visual arts or it's music, dance, or theater, and the other standard, which in this case is going to be social studies, are held in balance. Like on a scale, to make sure that they're both taught with fidelity. So real arts integration, it requires more than just the ABC song to get kids engaged. So this is the DOE's definition, which relies heavily on the Kennedy Center's definition of arts integration. But basically, it needs to be able to allow students to synthesize content, but it also has to be some fidelity between the standards for the art form, in this case, visual art, and the social studies standards. So you're going to end up assessing, when you use visual journals, the art portion as well as the social studies standards that are being used in the journal prompts.
And then you might be asking yourself, but wait, I don't know the art standards and I can't draw.
That's true. And that we hear a lot, and that's okay, because the point is not necessarily that you can draw or that you can act, for that matter, because I can't do that. But you can still be really involved in good, like real arts education. So if you switch your slides. So when the Georgia Standards of Excellence for Visual Art were created, it was really important to the 100+ art teachers that were involved that there was a link to other subjects K through 12. And the easiest link for visual arts is actually social studies, because of the tie-in between history and art history. So I've got some example standards and elements on the screen, and this is for first grade. So if you kind of grab it and take a look, it's like this standard, actually both of these standards go all the way through elementary school, so that every grade level has a standard that is investigate and discover the relationship between artists to their community and their culture, and even through the world through making, studying art. And then the bullets underneath can be taught separately with that standard, or they can all be taught together. So even as a social studies teacher, you don't have to know anything about drawing or anything about an art style to be able to teach your students this standard. Same thing for the second one, which is integrating information from other disciplines to enhance productions of art.
And since we have Jennifer here, who is a former first grade teacher, Jennifer, where do you see the connection directly with the first grade standards and this particular one?
In this particular one, I can see it tying back to the historical figures and how things have changed over time. The connecting themes and enduring understandings about things that that time, continuity, and change connecting theme.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think the next one we have is middle school.
It is, and middle school has, because of the connection cycle in middle school, and that students usually get a connection for 9 weeks or 18 weeks, and they don't necessarily get art all 3 years of middle school. There's a lot of overlap. So if you're a middle school social studies teacher, any 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, the standards are going to be the same, much like elementary school where they build on each other. So this standard's about reflecting on the contents of an artist's artwork and its relationship to community, culture, and the world. So again, as a social studies teacher, this is no stretch for you to teach it with fidelity at the same time as teaching your own standards. Like Jennifer said, you've got issues of time and place. You talk about themes and moods, which link really well to your social studies connecting themes, and how we encounter images in our daily lives and how that influences our worldview. And that's a great tie-in with social studies on so many levels as history unfolds before us.
And I'm just thinking, and Joanne, pop in, because I know you used to teach 6th grade as well. But when you're talking about that first one, identify how issues of time, place, and culture are reflected in selected artwork. You can see that throughout, in 6th grade, when you're talking about any of the historical events in Europe, any of the economic events or geographic events, when you're talking about political cartoons of certain time periods. So, and really that's true for 7th grade as well, because they're both teaching kind of modern world studies with a geography and economic focus and governmental focus. I'm on the wrong one. Hold on. Boom.
And then for our high school social studies teachers, the students come in and out of electives courses depending on the semester. But the one art class that every high school student has to take first is called Visual Art Comprehensive 1. So it's always safe to look at the Visual Art Comprehensive standards of the GSC if you're going to grab a standard from visual arts to teach in conjunction with your social studies standard. So this one's talking about the basically reflecting on and revising your artwork as a student, considering traditional and contemporary practices and how artists think of ideas. Also, in all classes K through 12, there's a standard that is about keeping a visual and verbal record to explore and develop works of art. So that's all about making connections through artistic research, planning, and reflection. So by using a journal of some sorts as an arts integration engagement tool in your social studies class, you automatically teach this standard that runs all the way K through 12. So by teaching the art standards in conjunction with the social studies standards, you're teaching it with a better level of fidelity instead of just taking them kind of on a date for a free dinner, which is what I always think about with the ABC song. Is it's like the arts are the train that are taking your standards down the track, but you're not necessarily moving their standards along at the same time.
So in the first Let's Get Visual virtual section, we talked about how to engage your kids with visual note taking in a visual journal. And so if you really wanted to have true arts integration, next to your standard for the course, you would have this particular art standard about making visual verbal connections through research, planning, and reflection, and then have your students focus on that with the content as they're taking notes or as they're doing some of the journal entries that we'll talk about later on today. And you could have the same one up for a while. You don't have to switch them out every day. You could focus on the visual verbal journal, and then another day you could focus on reflection. And since this is not grade specific, you could use it whether you're teaching a course in ninth grade or their senior year.
So what's a visual verbal journal, or what's a social studies notebook, whatever you want to call it? We reviewed this a little bit last time we talked, but basically it can just be some copy paper that is stapled together. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And if you take this class in person with Joy and I, we actually give you a really nice sketchbook and colored pencils and everything else. But just kind of keep in your mind that it doesn't have to be fancy for it to work, but it's a place for students to record what's going on in your classroom and make a personal connection to it. And it's that personal connection that helps them remember what you're teaching more easily, and it helps them make a personal connection to history and bring it into their world. So when you're going to create a visual journal, staring at a blank page, whether you're an adult or a student, is hard. And even when I was an art teacher, the days that kids would be like, oh, we just want to have free draw. If I finish early, can I do whatever I want? They would do these little teeny tiny, like alphabet soup circles in the center of a big white page, or they would sometimes do kind of trite images over and over because a blank page is scary. So when you're starting to introduce journals as a way for them to take their own notes, instead of you doing all the handouts and all the prep work for them, there's really 3 easy ways to teach them to be successful. And that's composition, which is how the things are laid out on the page, medium, or the tool that's being used. So medium is a fancy word for pencil or paint or markers or collage, depending on what you have in your classroom. And then the subject matter. So you received a handout. Is that the next slide, Joy?
Yeah, but I want to stop for just a minute and make sure that we're differentiating between the note taking that they're doing every day, that they make choices on organization, structure, size, and color. That doesn't have any particular, doesn't have to have any particular assigned format, versus what we're about to get into, which is more of a formative or summative assessment, which is an assignment that maybe they would do at home with the information that they've given. And there it is. Ta-da.
There you go. So this was a handout that I created when I was teaching high school, and I was also teaching at Georgia State at the time. So there's a lot of student teachers who went off with this, but it's a pretty easy way for students to be successful in the art room and choose what they want to use. So obviously, if it was an art class, the technique column and the composition column would be all the way to the bottom of the page. But for what we're going to teach you today about how to do visual journaling in your social studies classroom, we chose the most popular layouts, if you think about how a magazine's laid out, and we chose mediums that we thought you would have in your classroom. Now, in my art room, the themes were all about different art standards and different things that the students had to do for ideation to start thinking creatively. And what Joy did is went in and connected those to your social studies themes. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So the idea here is that when Jess and I first got together, it was every classroom had students create something. Maybe you had kids draw a political cartoon, or you had them, create a picture book if you were getting fancy, or maybe you had them do a collage. I had done that and seen that 100 times, but it was arts enhancement. I just used that collage as a way to figure out what they knew, but I wasn't really teaching them anything about art. So all this does is kind of just like the social studies skills, map and globe skills, or information processing, it allows them to focus on different compositions or different mediums within the context of the standards. And the one thing that social studies has K-12, the one thing that's common are those connecting themes and enduring understandings. Now, if any of you are elementary, I know, Jennifer, I'm going to pick on you. I know that you have that, or maybe Joanne has that document that are the connecting themes in kid language that
Yes.
maybe we can either send to you after or post it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll post it right now.
Or both. But these are the things from kindergarten to when they're seniors in high school. Every topic that they will discuss, every specific topic, will relate to culture or conflict or change, and or movement and migration, or a location. So this is the commonality that we have, and if you hook the assessment to that, it makes it easier to translate. So I think what Jess is going to do is go through each of these columns with you, or go through the composition column at least. Yep.
Yeah. So the idea with our compositions is if you give the kids parameters, and we always call it creativity within constraints in the art world, but if you give them some parameters, what they're able to achieve is so much greater than when they're just looking at that blank page and you get a I love so-and-so or a lightning bolt or whatever is the cool drawing of the year. So full page design, if you think about a magazine, and you can see on the sketchbook on the right, there's a seam, and this book has a seam in the middle. A full page spread is literally just when you fill up one entire side of a open book. So if you tell students that all of their notes or whatever activity you're doing in their journal that is arts integrated and is going to be used as a formative assessment or summative assessment, that it has to take up the whole page. So that means it has to run off the edges. They know what cropping is now, thanks to iPhones and cell phones. So they need to make sure that everything in the entire page is full. Anything else, Joy?
Yep. We've included some historical examples. So on the left is a Persian manuscript that is next to this modern art that I'm pretty sure Jess drew. There you go.
Yeah, I don't even remember what it was. That one was about now. The other thing that is fairly common is a bleed, or also known as a double page spread. So this is going to be where you want the students' work. This would be like instead of doing a social studies fair poster, you have them do a double page spread, which means it goes all the way across the gutter of their sketchbook onto the other side. It's still going to go all the way to the edges of the page. But by giving them these parameters, it makes the work look so much more organized, which makes them proud of it. And then they're more likely to spend more time on your assessment.
Points for anybody who can name the image on the left, but I know you can, Joanne, but I pulled this one because this is actually what was printed in a magazine, which is not the full image, which is also very interesting. Ruby Bridges, yes. Painted by Norman Rockwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Oh, look, there's his name right there.
The one that we get, that when we do this as a live class, it's usually an all-day session, that we use the most are borders, because it's a very easy way to add more information into the edges around the students' notes. So they can use a particular color to make them, remind them of something. They can actually write some of their thoughts around the edges. For your kids who are visual learners and kinesthetic learners, this is a way that helps them absorb information better. Even if they don't really, if they're not great at drawing, it doesn't really matter. The fact that they are moving and writing the entire time and associating some sort of meaning with it, even if that's font or color, helps increase their absorption of the materials. So on the right or on the left, you see just a little border that's a little thin red line. These are literally notes from a meeting I had with our boss's boss quite a while ago. And she's a big tea drinker. So the whole time we were talking, she was dunking her tea bag. So that's how that ended up being there. but I ended up coloring it up in later at a different meeting. But that's one of the ways as a kinesthetic person that I can stay focused during meetings and make sure that I get the information. You'll have to get used to your students, instead of looking at the board the whole time and telling you to stop, stop, stop. I want to write down every word. You have to get a little bit used to them using symbolism and borders in their notes.
And it's okay to draw a symbol in your notes and then put a caption or draw a line and do a quick description. You know, even for me, that helps me figure out what it was I was trying to say before. I included a historical example. Anyone know? Anyone know? It's a fresca. It would be more akin to world history. It's the Minoans from Crete, and doing a fantastic fun activity of jumping over a bull, because you know that's fun.
That's what one does. This is one of the ones that students get the most fired up about, because their love of comic books and graphic novels have really taken comics to a whole nother level. So I, many moons ago, went to Japan on a Fulbright, and they were really nice about giving us notes. However, a lot of times the notes were in Japanese. So I made a fabulous collage during a meeting once with them because I wasn't sure what else to do with them. And then Joy found us a great graphic novel on the left. Do we know who it is, Joy?
Yeah, it's from the Jekyll Island Chronicles.
There you go.
Which is set in World War I. And Jekyll Island, and there's a lot of history there and connection to Georgia history. So, you know, I picked it because 8th grade and high school U.S. history. But comics aren't just a new thing. Comics can be primary sources as well. During the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King and the SELC created a comic to distribute to support kids' knowledge of what was going on. Of course, John Lewis's March trilogy. Yep.
So when you ask students to use grids as a composition, it's second nature to them. As soon as you say like a graphic novel, they just take off.
Or a comic book, yeah.
Radial design is something that you see over and over again in magazines, and you don't even realize it's a radial design. All it means is that everything points to or goes around a central focal point. So on the left is my warning to everyone that the varsity seems like a really good idea in the airport before an international flight, but that was probably not my best choice of meals for the next 12 hours of jumping up and down in the plane. But that's a radial design. It's circular, it goes around a central focal point. In the middle, we found this fabulous magazine photo. And I don't even remember which magazine we got it from now, Joy.
I think I linked it in the bottom of the slide, but it is, I scrolled past it because it didn't occur to me. I thought it was colored pencils, but it's not. But Jess and Jennifer and Joanne, do you know what it is? Did I tell you? I might have told you. That's cheating. They're missiles.
Oh.
So this is the arms race. And it's stunning. Stunning.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, and it's a great example of how often history is in the news. So teaching students how to translate this visually is really important, because a lot of the way they're getting news is through media now.
And then on the right is an example from one of our face-to-face workshops, and a teacher created this particular superhero called Unity. And so and of course they didn't have time to finish the workshop, but that was the central. So it's kind of like a circle map, right? So it's in the middle. The main topic is in the middle, and then the information comes out from the center.
But what's important is that when most people introduce circle maps or T-charts, is that they give the students a piece of paper that already has it drawn on it, where you don't get as many ways for students to tie history to themselves and make personal meaning when you give them something that's already created. Them creating it and having some sort of symbolism is into why this is bigger or this is a different color is important in them having retention and feeling connected to the material.
And it's choice, it's creativity, right? So if you give them a Venn diagram, you are telling them just by its mere shape that the similarities are less than the differences. So allowing them to kind of create their own gives them freedom in that sense.
Mhm. Another composition that you see commonly are columns. We've got some hieroglyphs on the right, and an old journal page of mine that was an idea for sculpture with some birch trees, and one is covered in maps because I was thinking about how the way the birch bark peels off trees looks like a map.
And you also have lead the way in there. We've had, and I couldn't find it, but we had some teachers do some really great assignments using columns. Particularly in 8th grade, they took the Georgia Seal and they took the columns and put information in those. It was smart. It was very smart.
And I know some of you are still going, I don't understand why I'm learning this. But again, if you can make them be successful and set them up for success with a few creative constraints, it really helps them get the ideas flowing and get things going. So cutouts and windows are one of the more advanced techniques that you might teach students. And that would be that you can cut through and see through an area into another area. That's super important. And if you look at the right, Joy took this out of one of your favorite picture books.
I want Jennifer or Joanne to talk to us about the two right images.
This is a picture book, like you were saying, and it has opposite features. So on one side of the page, they have the land feature, and the opposite side of the page, they have the water feature, and they use cutouts to make that happen. So on this one, you can see the lake is the water feature, and then when you flip it, island is the land feature. So not only does it teach the students landforms, but it teaches it in a way that they can relate to it and understand it a little more clearly. And then the other thing that was really cool that Joanne learned about were the ways that the author used the people in the image. You know, on the first read, Joanne and I were so excited about the cutouts and the new way to teach the landforms that we didn't notice the people at first. I'll let Joanne tell more about that.
Well, there's a story going on with the figures in the images too, or the kids can make a story out of those figures. So there's just, you caught me with my mouth full. There are lots of layered meanings here.
Notice how I call out Jennifer. Jennifer called out Joanne. See, it's a family thing. We throw each other under the bus. So to address Jess's why am I learning this, just as kind of a reminder, part of arts integration is teaching both the content of both subjects. So just giving them that structure Jess is talking about. Today, we're going to focus on radial design. Today, we're going to focus on cutouts. And that might be the last one you do. It's the same thing, you know, Jess, I was thinking when we were doing this morning, this is how I would teach annotation strategies one at a time. Like I would do annotation. I'd just do questions for a week, and then I would just do most important detail for a week, and then unfamiliar word for a week before I'd start combining them together. And I was thinking that's exactly how I would do this. For one unit, we would just focus on border, and then the next unit we would focus on radial design. So a very similar skill separation.
Well, and you are teaching them how to be good note takers, which is something we hear from over and over again in our work with the University System of Georgia, is that students are so used to being given the notes or given handouts that they actually, when they get to college, don't know how to synthesize information on their own and make their own notes that they'll actually remember.
And so many times in classes, I see the teacher taking notes at the front of the class on the, well, not so much on the overhead anymore, because, you know, that's so 5 minutes ago. But I see teachers typing the same kind of formats, and there is a time and a place for that. But if they are just copying the notes that you are putting on the page, there's not a whole lot of thought going into that. I think we might have time. This is 2 minutes if you want to. I don't have the sound on because you don't need it. But do you want to talk over this?
Sure. The idea that we have with this is normally you're in person with us and we've given you colored pencils, like just cheap Crayola ones that you would use in class. But this is, again, something that really elevates the work and makes the students more proud of it, is most of us never learned how to use colored pencils or learn the difference between papers. So in your sketchbook, say your sketchbook you give your students, or your journal you give your students, is just copy paper. Copy paper is incredibly smooth, which means it doesn't have any fibers that stick up like carpet hairs. So if you look at right now, you can see the one on the top is very rough and the one on the bottom is really smooth. The smooth one is going to be more like your copy paper. So what ends up happening is the rough one that has more little carpet fibers can grab more pencil, and it holds on to it kind of like a stain. And because of that, you can have richer colors, better colors. It makes everything look 100 times better just by itself. So just know that, you know, if you have a waxy crayon or a waxy colored pencil on copy paper, it's always going to get really shiny, and it will eventually kind of peel off in these little balls. It's because there's not
They're
enough
called color boogers.
color boogers. Yeah, coloring pencil boogers. There's not enough tooth in the hot press paper to actually hold on to the wax in the colored pencils. So
and that's what's in the crayons and colored pencils have in common. They both have wax and pigment.
Mm-hmm. So a colored pencil, the better quality colored pencils have more pigment and less wax. The cheapest colored pencils, like the kinds you could get at the dollar store that are not even Crayola, there's so much wax that you can't get a real color with it. Oil-based colored pencils you can buy, and I've seen them on Amazon cheap sometimes, but they're very messy and they're not easy to clean up. And then now you can also buy watercolored colored pencils, even if it's just Crayola. So the watercolor pencils, if you have a wet paintbrush with just water on it, actually turns it into watercolor. So if you're going to invest in a class pack of Crayola colored pencils, I would get the watercolor pencils, which are a couple dollars more for the class pack, because then you also have paint for free.
The reason we're showing you this is because you don't have to remember everything Jess said with your class. You can just show them the first few minutes of this video and they have the same information. And I wouldn't use the whole video even.
No, and that's kind of true of everything. So say you want to do collage. I know a lot of social studies teachers use magazine cutouts and do collage. If you look on YouTube or just Google collage examples, you'll find a 1 or 2 minute video that is 100 times better than what the kids would have done on their own. That will tell them, you know, how to put it down correctly, how to have things not, you know, roll up. One of the things we have as a warning, it's like Danger Will Robinson, is colored pencils are pigment and wax. And when you use a colored pencil or a pencil sharpener, whether it's a handheld or an electric one, the cutting wheels cause friction, which makes the wax hot, and then it ruins your pencil sharpener. So if you want to kill a $50 electric pencil sharpener, put colored pencils in it, because they get coated with wax like a candle melting all over them. Same thing with the one on your wall. So this is the one time you want to make sure that you have a couple of little hand sharpeners on the tables when kids are working, to make sure they can hand sharpen the colored pencils. So that's just a Danger Will Robinson note to self.
And 2 more little tips really quick that at least gave me aha moments, and then we'll move on to the next thing. And you'll get the link to this so you can watch it later, like a close read. I always did long strokes with colored pencils, but that is apparently not how you do it. If you look on the screen, they're doing tiny little circles to pack the pigment better. And then
the circles overlap, and then you can't see all those lines on the paper. Same thing works with markers.
Just tell them what the white colored pencil's for.
Is it on the video? I, as an art teacher for many, many years, would sort all the colored pencils into bins by color so the kids could go up and just grab a color. And then every year I'd have an entire colored pencil bin full of the white colored pencil, and no one would ever use it. And I didn't know what they were for. They're actually blenders. So if you do use the little circles instead of the back and forth, and then you have like pink, but you take the white one and do the circles with the white pencil over the pink, it'll turn it a lighter shade of pink, and it kind of smears and blends all the colors together to make them more even. So again, these are easy, quick ways Do you do arts integration with your classroom where it's successful regardless of the fact that you're not a trained art teacher?
And there's only 3 minutes of that video that I would say that they needed, and it does talk about the white blender pencil. And once you
Mhm.
showed it once, you really don't have to do it again. So again, doing some arts education and saving some time. And so Jess is going to talk now about, actually, I guess we both are, about the first kind of summative journal prompt, or like you've gotten to the end of the week and you need something to wrap up the week. So it's more of a formative assessment. But this is what Jess used all the time, and we adapted it.
Yeah, this was a project that I would do often on the first day of class. I taught middle school, high school, and college. Um, in the years I was teaching middle school, because I'm older, there were six-week elective connections. So it was like every 6 weeks you had new kids. So there was a time period where you were like, I still don't know your name. And there you go, until 7th grade. So I started developing this prompt that told me a whole bunch in a short amount of time. So again, if you think about those columns on the worksheet, you want to choose a composition. The one on the left is my teacher example. It's a single page spread, which just means one piece of paper, and it has a border. So my border is nothing fancy. It is just yellow. The medium is colored pencils. I actually had watercolor pencils, so that's why it looks so smooth in places. And then the subject matter of the project that I had already done with my kids as like a warm up, Joy connected it with your culture connecting theme. So what this is what's in your pocket. And through this prompt or through this icebreaker, I could tell they have to take everything out of their purse or their pockets, or if they don't have either, their backpack, whatever they have in your classroom, and then they need to talk about why they carry it with them. So you know, these are the typical things that I would always have, whether it was in the front of my backpack or it was in my purse. I always had headphones. I always had my iPhone. This is older now. I always have some sort of little dark chocolate. I always have a backup plan, usually more than one. So I always had a jump drive way before anybody had those. And the idea is that in this project, you can learn personally identifying things about your students to help you remember them. It allows them to share as much as they want about the items that they carry and why they're important to them. But it also told me who was special education long before their plans usually got to me, especially in that 6-week rotation. It told me who was ESOL. It often told me who were going to be my really good students because they followed the directions really well. But it's a great icebreaker. And then when Joy and I started talking about using this as a prompt in this class, when we do the full day session, she was like, you know, it's so weird. There's this other one online that I learned about, and you might probably want to take it from there.
Yeah, before I do though, I wanted to talk about teaching this connecting theme. So like Jess does in the art classroom, you could absolutely start your year off, if you're teaching the connecting themes, by just having them connect to culture by what's in their pocket or their book bag. I mean, if you looked around right now at your desk or wherever you are in your pockets in your bag, you could pull out different things and talk about how it is part of your culture and why it represents your culture. So after you do that, and maybe you're teaching 6th grade and a unit on Europe, you could do a what's in my pocket Europe, where Jess was assigned Germany, and maybe Joanne was assigned the UK, and somebody else was assigned France, and you did a what's in my pocket activity with them, where they had to figure out, you know, if on a normal day, if I live in the UK, what would be in my pocket? And it all describes, and how does that relate to culture of that particular area in that particular place. You could do the same thing in 7th grade between different places or different countries in Africa, or you know, you could make a comparison between, you know, South Africa and India, and you know, have a kid do each one, post them on the wall, and then have them go around as a gallery walk to do activities. But if you think about it in a historical context too, take US history, you could do the same activity for each unit, and maybe you don't have to do the full out you know, art thing, but maybe you do a quick write. Okay, we're during the American Revolution, you're a patriot, what's in your pocket, go. And they could brainstorm what might be in their pocket. And then someone will always tell me they didn't have pockets. But hey, that's people paying attention, right? And then what Jess was talking about, what if you flipped it? So that's having kids create or think about how culture influences what you carry, what you wear. But then actually, I think it was Joanne that told me about this website called what was in Lincoln's pockets. So the Library of Congress, and there's a link at the bottom there, the Library of Congress did a whole kind of series on what was in Lincoln's pocket when he was assassinated. And it's a great way, and I've seen it, AP World History teachers use something similar. They'll put a whole bunch of items in a brown paper bag, and the kids will have to pull it out and guess whose pocket it was or guess who carried it. So it's source analysis in both directions. And normally we'd have you do it, but we don't have time.
That's the only downside to the quicker format, is we have all these hands-on activities that nobody can do. So the other thing I always like to talk about if you're going into art integration and you're not sure where to start is that most of us can listen to a song on the radio and go, okay, that's a pop song. That's a country song. Oh, wait, this is a rap song. This is a Mexican polka. This is whatever. So we can differentiate. Well, there's so many different subcategories of art that if you're not an arts major, an art history major, or it's not your hobby, you don't have to know those things, because regardless of what time period you're going to show a piece of artwork as reference or an artifact for your lesson, they all fall into the same 5 categories. So think about them as like buckets, in the same way pop is a bucket for a whole bunch of musicians, or that country's a bucket for a whole bunch of musicians. So what you see in front of you is a game we normally do on the tables called Snap and Sort, where you have to sort through about 35 pictures into these 5 categories. And then when your team's done, you have to give snaps. I have one hand, so I'm a terrible clapper. So snapping works for me. You will see 5 images that we picked from our 30 plus that we usually do in person. And at the very top of the screen, you see 5 categories of art. And I will tell you that the last one, physical, could be physical / functional. So looking at the 5 images, where do you think each one fits in the categories at the top?
Take
so
about, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say you could put your answers in the chat.
Yeah, and you could just focus on one if you want to, but just tell us which one it is and where does it go.
Right, so is this personal artwork? Is this artwork that was created to be educational? Is this physical or functional artwork? Is this social, or is this, what's the first one? My stuff is in the way. Is it spiritual? I was gonna say religious, but okay. So of those, we've got a couple people putting them in the chat.
I got my timer on. We'll give them 20 seconds. Or you can unmute your mic, of course. And time. All right, Jess, what do we got? No idea. I like that.
No idea. Okay, so number 1 is a Gullah Geechee woven basket. And I'm assuming that as Georgia Social Studies teachers, most of you have heard of the Gullah Geechee. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, yeah, but you know what? Maybe since these are all in the slides, maybe we should just go to the slides.
Well, wait. Okay, let's go. Well,
Yeah.
let's go to the slides
Let's
and then
go
we'll
to
come back
slide.
to this. All right. So the first category of art, if you think about art in big sweeping terms like pop music, is personal. So personal artwork is typically art that was created by the artist for the artist. A lot of artwork that you see, especially in older time periods, was created for a patron. So then it's kind of like when I was an illustrator, I worked for Ford Motor Company for a while as an architectural illustrator. It was not my personal artwork. It was them telling me what they wanted to see. So personal artwork is typically that person's passion. So like a lot of people have seen the Edvard Munch, The Scream on the far right. the orange sky. Well, that piece is related to his mother having schizophrenia and trying to kill herself. And he thought he was becoming schizophrenic, and he thought the sky turned blood red. And, you know, we think about it as the Home Alone kid, you know, mimicked this painting and screamed into the camera. But it's personal artwork. He literally made the artwork just to get this imagery he had from his childhood out of his head.
And I cheated, Jess. Kusama number 4 is not on this slide, but it should be.
That is true. Kusama does installations. She was in, her show was in Atlanta. Was that last year? It was the year before COVID. So the year before
The last year before COVID, whenever that
last
was.
year before COVID, when we still went to things like art shows in person. And they're fabulous room-sized artworks of blown glass often, but they are all polka dotted. That is her jam. So social functions of art is another big category that artwork you may use. Like if you're a 7th grade social studies teacher, you may be still teaching about Africa. Tribal masks and dances, those are social functions of art. All Japanese and Chinese dragon dances, like for the New Year's, those are social forms of art. The idea is that it is bringing people together. The artwork itself is part of a celebration that's goal is to unite people or tell a story or bring people together to feel a certain way. So on the far left, yeah, celebrate usually. On the far left is the Atlanta Beltline Parade, which is typically in September every year. It started with a couple hundred people who were interested in Mardi Gras and had been involved in Mardi Gras when they lived in Louisiana. And they said, anybody who comes with a glowing lantern can be in our parade on the Beltline. Now it's more than 10,000 people annually. Lots of schools. So the spiritual function of art, again, it's a big category, is typically artwork that is produced as an outpouring of someone's religious faith, or is artwork that was commissioned by a religious organization, like a church, a synagogue, a mosque. So all of these examples would be considered spiritual, a spiritual category or function of art. The physical function of art, we're talking about the Gullah Geechee basket. This is going to be what you would think of as functional artwork. So this is the artwork that we forget is artwork, like your clothes. A lot of times, like someone designed them, you didn't just pick them up just to be clothed. You decided you liked a color or a style. It's art. We just forget it's art. Our sneakers are art, our cars, our pencils, our cell phones. On the screen before you, you see some pretty traditional designs, like Georgia face jugs. You see a woven rug, an urn that carried wine or water. And then do you want to talk about the basket, Joy?
I don't know that we have time, but I'll also throw in some historical examples like the kente cloth or Roman aqueducts. All of those things were both artwork and served a function.
Right. And then educational function of art or category art is another one that is traditionally what people see in public art. So our example in our quiz earlier, which most people got right who put it in the chat, was that this was an educational function of art. The far left is a Howard Finster, who's was a Georgia native. This was a tribute he did to former presidents that he admired. You'll see a couple of Jimmy Carter images on there. In the middle is an MLK image that was right across from Joy and I's desk in the Twin Towers. And MLK is looking towards Sweet Auburn and his front foot is lifting off and is pointing straight at his former home. So educational functions of art, you'll think about illuminated manuscripts as an artifact. You'll think about stained glass windows as an artifact.
So if you were with us last time, we showed you a quick activity you could use tomorrow in the classroom called 30 Seconds that focuses on visual literacy. So what we'd like you to do is take 30 seconds right now and don't write, just look at this image. And what you want to be looking for are the two questions. What do you notice about composition, the things that you learned about composition from earlier today? And what do you notice about, or what do you think about the function of this art? Composition and function is your focus. 30 seconds, go. Just observe, don't type. All right, that is time. If you want to put anything in the chat that you noticed, if you want to call out what you think the composition or the function is, and while you are making those comments, this is actually from, oh, I was going to tell you it's from the Canadian Home Journal, but you know,
It
it's
says it,
printed.
doesn't it?
It says
Yeah.
it. Yeah. I was going to be all fancy. Whoops. So I call this activity 30 seconds because I segment it into 30 seconds. I think Jess calls it arts categories, but the
I did.
idea.
Its categories is trademarked.
Uh-oh, I'll change that slide before we send it. So the idea here is you're giving students 30 seconds to really just observe with a purpose. The next 30 seconds is them jotting down silently their personal thoughts and ideas about what you were focusing them on. And then you can move into 30-second turn and talk or small group discussion, and then 30-second whole group discussion. But it
And
is,
we will give you those instructions
yeah.
for the folks that couldn't make the first session.
Right. And look, there they are. Ta-da.
There you go.
I'm gonna change that categories for our send it, I guess.
The
Go
other
ahead.
thing that people ask us a lot is about assessment. I would say that the work that you have the students do in their sketchbook or journal or social studies notebook should be a formative or summative assessment. A lot of times it's something they will do at home and they'll actually do it. And then you can use that as an in-class assessment. So we came up with a very generic rubric that goes through the universal art standards that go K through 12. So you could use this and mix this in with your social studies standards that you're teaching.
I might just, if I'm creating a rubric for this, I might have like 2 categories for the content and 2, I might choose 2 of these criteria here to include in the rubric. So it's kind of a half and half thing.
Right, because we want them to be expert art integrators, not art enhancers. So they're gonna teach and assess both sets of standards, but you don't have to teach all the art standards. You've got just a handful that will get you to where you need to be.
So quick review, and then we're going to give you some stuff to go try. First is we looked at what the definition of arts integration is, which is that we want to teach and assess both the art and the social studies standards with fidelity. The second thing you learned today is composition. And just, I think we had 5 different compositions, which is a quick way to give your kids some structure for their assignments. You learned about the functions of art, which you can use really well with analysis of primary sources or secondary sources. The 30-second activity we reviewed, which is great for visual literacy. And I wanted to make sure that we are making the connection between what we're doing with this arts integration and map and globe and information processing skills. And if you're in grades 6 through 12, also reading and writing skills. So on a lot of these literacy pieces, we're asking them to write arguments focused on a specific topic and citing evidence. Well, that's what they're doing in these formative assessments, like what's in your pocket. We're asking them to cite specific evidence from a text. Well, that's what they're doing when they're using good visual note-taking skills. So we're connecting to the inquiry-based skills, the social studies content, and also we're doing that by integrating arts into our lessons. And I think these words, college and career skills, have gotten a bad rap recently, but the reality is everything that they're watching on TV, all the commercials, the magazines, the pop-up ads, they all involve art. They all involve composition and medium, and they're doing it with our content. So it is something that they can use immediately outside of your classroom and inside your classroom. So what we're going to do, we are going to give you these. These are more formative or summative assessments. They're larger activities that you can do really K-12. What I would do is I would tell them at the beginning of the unit, this is what you're going to create. I would have them start making drafts as we went through the different days of the unit. I might have openers where I say, come in tomorrow with an early sketch or your brainstorm ideas, and then pair up and share your ideas and then ask questions so that they have some support along the way for their pieces. But this first one, based on that handout that Jess created and we gave you, here are your 3 steps. The composition for this one is a single page with grid, which remember is kind of like a comic book. Medium is colored pencils, but you can make it whatever you want. The subject matter is
whatever they have.
right. The subject matter is incentives, which is responding positive and negatively to different incentives. So this particular journal is about a place. You want to choose a place from, whether it's a historical place or an actual place, from your unit or your standards. And they're really going to take on the role of a real estate agent, and they're going to create a real estate ad for that particular place where they're going to focus on some of the positive things. And sometimes they might have to take some negative things and really throw it in and really work it, use their literary skills to make it a positive thing. And you might want them to show them a few real estate ads, because things like price and wording that they use and the images that they share will influence how they create this particular assignment. And they could really do this digitally as well. The second, and everybody can pick a different place, and that's okay. Or they could pick places that you didn't think that they were going to pick, and that's okay too, as long as they explain it. The second one, and this is my favorite, is superpowers, because all you have to have is an issue or a problem in your unit. Maybe it's an environmental issue, maybe it's a civil rights issue, maybe it's a political conflict. But what they're going to do is create a superhero that has superpowers to address that issue. And you saw in one of our slides, the little hero in the middle, this is going to be a radial design. So they're going to put their superhero in the middle. They're going to put the powers, explain why they need these powers, what issue are they trying to solve, a little bit of their backstory, so some creativity going on, an origin story. And this can work really in any classroom. And then the fourth one is the moment. This is kind of an evaluation skill. They want to pick the most important moment. I think I was inspired by I think History Channel did the 10 most important days in US history, like Einstein writing a letter to FDR to start the Manhattan Project. So whatever it is that they think is the most important moment, they're going to illustrate that moment, and they're not going to describe it in words. They're going to explain why that moment was the most important moment that they learned in that particular unit. And if you do these consistently, like if you do superheroes one unit, in the moment another unit, the real estate, the location one in a different unit, and then you go back to in the moment, then they can connect to prior knowledge as well.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! Jess,
we made it. Barely.
We made it. So follow us on social media. I always share some of Jess's stuff because it relates. Some of the artwork she shares or the opportunities she shares are good for our kids in social studies as well, and vice versa. So here we are on Twitter for social studies and fine arts, and on Facebook. And social studies has an Instagram account that is a teacher takeover. So if you're following us on Twitter and Facebook, you'll see when we open up applications to take over our account in July. And we'd love to have you share with us some of the awesome things that you guys are doing. Our emails are here. You'll also have those when we send you the email after this presentation that has the PowerPoint that you're welcome to use, and the handouts, and the recording will be available. The last thing we need from you guys, Jennifer, do you have that? I guess I can put it in the chat.
The QR code.
I don't have.
Also, for those of you that are interested in art or music, like we have a 35-minute session coming up that is free to anyone, and you do not have to be a music teacher to sign up, for how to learn how to play the ukulele 101. If you want to learn about visual journaling with me, that is coming up next month. So you're also welcome to join any of our sessions. We're very inclusive, and we're also doing them all online, and they're asynchronous.
So I put two things in the chat. One is mine and Jess's email addresses, and the second is a link to the feedback form that you see the QR code for here. This proves to our bosses that we were not eating bonbons on the couch in our jammies.
That is true.
We could be in our jammies, and you might never know.
I have real pants on today.
Oh yeah, this is true. But we don't know what Jennifer and Joanne are doing back there. So
that's true.
Thanks you guys for joining.